afternoon, everybody. Welcome back after lunch. Well, for those of you that may not know me, my name is Brandon Anderson. I have the pleasure of being the Executive Director and CEO of the Auburn Duesenberg Automobile Museum. And thank you. Woo! Auburn Duesenberg. Our first day and our first session, you got to hear from two of our amazing staff members, Elyse and Madison, during their presentation. It's my pleasure to bring back Elyse to you to talk about accessible programming that's both for sensory and disability friendly. Elyse has done a magnificent job with our educational programs and making our museum accessible and open for all. So I know we're all looking forward to seeing the work that she did to make that happen over the years. So without further ado, I will give it over to Elyse.
Thank you very much, Brandon. So today I want to talk a little bit about why you should consider doing accessible programming and kind of give you some concrete tools that you can take back. So even if you don't maybe choose to do a specifically disability-friendly program, that you can in turn make your museum more welcoming to visitors who have a disability of any kind. So why should you care? Well, I'd like you to meet this handsome gentleman, since you guys are meeting my whole family this week. This is my uncle. His name is Bub. And you can see in this picture that Bub loves cars. And Bub has never driven in his life. He does not have a driver's license. And Bub has a disability. He's intellectually disabled. And Bub absolutely loves he's come to our museum many times with me, and he has bought out the gift shop at least 4 or 5 times. And so if you are not considering individuals with disabilities in your programming, you're really missing out on a huge audience. I can't tell you the number of times when I've had a program, and I'll talk about the programs that we do, and I've had a little boy or a little girl tell me every car and every single fact about that car that you could possibly want to know. These are the people who will love your museum and will want to come back. And if you can accept them and tell them that they are welcome with you, they will pay you back, okay? So people with disabilities also represent a not insignificant amount of spending power, $21 billion in discretionary income, okay? And if they can't get to you and can't don't feel like they're welcome in your museums, they're not gonna spend their money there, okay? And you also have a huge amount of your audience as well. 13% of the US population has a disability, and some estimates put it as many as 1 in 4 individuals has or will have a disability at some point in their life. So you're literally missing out on this huge chunk of the population if you're not able to make friendly programming. So I'm gonna talk a little bit about our program that we do. So our first program we have is Access Days. And these are days specifically geared for individuals with disabilities to come with their families. We have a grant through a generous partner of ours that grants us free admission for those people. They just have to pre-register, or when they come, register. And then as part of those days, we have some kind of extra value-added bonuses. So I set up a handful of what we call sensory stations, so sensory stories. So we talked a little bit at our presentation, at our last presentation, about utilizing your collection to tell the stories that you have to tell. So how can you tell those stories while really incorporating all 5 senses? Because we're so used to walking through a museum and you read the signs. Well, how do you learn if you can't read, okay? You can't. You're not going to get anything out of that. So if you can find a way to talk to people without just relying on reading a sign panel, you're going to really be able to engage them deeply. And not only that, not only are you going to help people who maybe can't read or don't want to read or have a struggle with that, you're going to get people who are just going to be really curious about what you're doing. So some of the sensory stations I've done, we have one car in our collection that was owned by a farmer, and his daughter ran off with a man he didn't like, And so he locked it in the barn, and basically it sat there for years and years and years. And so we told the story of this gal and her car and how her father took it away. We had some stuffed chickens. We had the smell of fresh cut grass and hay. We had the interior fabric of the cars, so I got reproduction fabric so that individuals could feel the broadcloth and the silk of the car. And we have pictures and things too, so we can explain, hey, where did this come from? Who owned this car? What was happening? So we can engage, thinking about all the ways we can engage with our different senses. I've also pulled out, we have a horn, so we can honk our horns. Thinking about all the ways you can get all 5 senses pulled in. We also open one set of restrooms to be gender neutral, and this is really critical. I was actually at a workshop with a mom, and her son had Down syndrome. And she said that one of the single hardest things when she was going out in the public was she was an adult woman and her son was an adult man, but he was not able to he needed a little bathroom assistance, okay? And she couldn't walk into the women's restroom with him because he was an adult man. And she didn't feel comfortable walking into the men's restroom with him because she was an adult woman. And so she was like, well, we just left. And that's something that you guys don't want to have happen, right? If you have someone who's like, wow, I just can't find a place where I'm comfortable to do this thing that is basic to human anatomy, well, they're just going to leave. And you're not going to be able to, they're not going to be able to engage with your guys' exhibits in the same way. So we also have maps of activities and exhibits with things planned out so visitors know what to expect. I also have sensory backpacks, and those are actually available to be checked out year-round. And so in there, I have extra tools. For instance, I have visual timers, which is just a clock that shows you how much time you have left. And this is great because I think we all have probably had that situation where you're like, okay, 5 more minutes. Like, what does 5 minutes really look like? We all know it's different depending on the day, right? So visual timers can be great for individuals who maybe struggle with time management. There are sensory-friendly toys. I have Jacob's ladders, balls, zippers, plastic straws. That sounds crazy, but plastic straws are the bomb to play with. So things that someone can perhaps fidget with instead of, wanting to touch your artifacts. Maybe they want something tactile to touch. I also have a matchbox of our Cord A10 so that they can hold and touch that and see, we have the little car you can touch and do whatever you want. You can't touch the big car, but here's a way that you can still interact with it. We also, during those days, have extra volunteers and staff around in order to kind of help assist individuals. We also limit attendance, and I specifically gear these days for days that we have kind of naturally lower attendance. We all have probably slow times of the year, and so picking those days, this is a way to kind of better utilize that time that maybe you might otherwise have some slow time. It's also worthwhile to think about limiting noises and lights. If you have galleries that are particularly bright, stroby, flashing, really overwhelming for individuals, can you dim the lights? Can you turn down the noise? Are those things you can do? And then lastly, I use a system called color communication badges. And I genuinely wish I could do this everywhere all the time. So it's a technique recommended by the National Autism Network. And so there are 3 colors of badge. There's green, which means talk to me. There's yellow, which means don't come up to me, I'm not friendly. And there's red, which means don't talk to me unless you really, really have to. And I'm like, what a genius way to illustrate to your docents just how many times have you had a docent who walks up to you and you're like, don't talk to me, I'm not into it right now. And if you could just have a nice badge that says, hey, don't talk to me, I know more than you. We've all wanted that, right? So it's really effective, especially for individuals who maybe, find, if you're having a bunch of docents coming up to you and you're an individual with autism, that's really overwhelming and uncomfortable. So if you can right away tell those docents to, stay away, or also maybe you're someone who really loves talking and you don't know how to initiate. And if you're wearing a green button, then those docents can be like, oh, hey, I'd love to talk to you about this. So everyone wins. And so it's really a genuinely great way to kind of like smooth the social fabric that way. So another portion of this program is I mail out accessible classroom kits. So this started during COVID because, of course, individuals with disabilities often had a hard time going out during the pandemic, even once things started reopening, because many of them had advanced medical needs. And so they just weren't able to be in a museum atmosphere. So these went out. And so I created them as, I have two that have gone out now. So the first one I made was painting automobiles. So we made our own paint. Using some pretty simple ingredients. If you guys have heard of milk paint, we made a basic milk paint. And then they painted some cool wooden cars. And we talked a little bit about the history of car painting, which there's actually a lot there, right? We have the whole story of, you could get a Model T in every color, except for, as long as you want it black, right? We've all heard that. So, and Model T Club, don't come for me. I know it's a myth. So anyway, there's a wealth of information there that you can share. And so included in those lessons is I tried to allow for adaptations. How do you adapt for individuals who might have special, needs as far as academic level. So maybe this could be geared for younger kids or adults. So how do you gear it towards multiple ages and skill levels? And just including helpful tips and tricks that teachers can use and basically have a ready-made program. And the advantage there is that you're getting, your mission out to those classes. So I talked about my car painting. My most recent one was actually gears and simple machines, and that's what's on top. So we made gears out of, it's just a pool noodle and popsicle sticks. And they make really great gears. And so you can talk about how do gears work? How do they work together? And so you can create activities that allow students to explore gears. And we talk a little bit about simple machines, which obviously, make up our cars. So this is a great way to maybe break into the classroom, in a really broad way and kind of dip your toes in. So something else that's really important for these types of programs is surveying and also talking with your community. So up on the left side, I have my Access Day registration. And I use a WooFoo form, which you guys can log in. It's a pretty low fee WooFoo form, but if you have another form building website or something, you can use that. And I ask my registrants, what kind of things can we do to make it easier for you to come? And so there's lots of areas where they can check boxes. And this also helps because maybe your staff might feel apprehensive about how to handle something like a service animal. Or maybe you have an individual who's in a wheelchair and your elevator is out. Well, that would be a great thing to be able to tell them. So that's kind of important when it comes to something like this. And then I have my survey here. So I actually have two forms of surveys. And Madison, I have a handful of them so that you guys can just take a look at them. And for Access Days, I actually distribute two forms of survey. So I have a simple survey and I have a complicated survey. And so individuals could pick which survey they wanted to use. So I use a very similar type of survey to the one that's on my screen with my school kids. So this is my educational program survey. The one that's Madison's handing out is the one that's specific for Access Days. So it's pretty easy and pictorial to read. And I strongly recommend that if you guys aren't surveying your educational programs, that you absolutely start because you're going to get a lot of valuable information from that. So I'm going to go into my next section and talk about some kind of practical pointers for helping individuals with disabilities. But first, I want you to turn to your neighbors, and I want you guys to think about what smell, taste, sound, or texture just drives you up a wall. What makes you feel uncomfortable? And I'll use my own example. I cannot stand to touch terracotta pots. I loathe it. It just drives me up a wall. It feels like nails on a chalkboard. okay? In the past, I've heard people, the smell of burnt popcorn, and it worms its way into your brain and drives you insane. So I want you to think in your little groups, what is that feeling, that weird little, sensation that makes you that makes you go into sensory overload? So I want to hear some of them. Maybe you hate the overwhelming smell of perfume, and you just can't get away from it. Oh, patchouli. Patchouli, yes. Oh, I've heard that one a lot. Burnt hair, oh. Maybe it's when your coworker puts fish in the microwave. Yeah, everyone knows you don't do that. So, this is a great introduction for understanding what it's like for individuals with autism. Because autism is a sensory disorder. So imagine that you had to walk into your life and every day you were wearing your itchiest socks and your falling downiest underwear and you were smelling burnt popcorn all day and you had a knot in your hair and a zit on your lip and you're just like, ugh. And now imagine trying to talk and communicate in a way that was helpful for people, right? It would be, we've all experienced those days of feeling sensory overload. And so it's not a unique phenomenon to individuals with autism. And so, thinking about, that feeling, okay, you can relate to those individuals who, when they walk into your museum, I think about, we have a huge showroom, and it's echoey, like as in we were in this theater, okay? And that can be very overstimulating for individuals. So think about ways, as you walk into your museum, when you guys go back, what are the things that you can write out the weight? What's really loud? What's got lots of bright lights, okay? What can you kind of tone down and think about how to maybe make it less stimulating for those individuals who might be visiting? So I'm going to talk about some tips for training your staff for working with individuals with disabilities. So I made this point first, and I'll make it again, is how can you train your staff to offer understanding and assistance instead of frustration? How can your first comment to staff, from staff and volunteers, be a positive influence and a positive comment to your visitors, okay? So the first thing that I would say is, with your volunteers, prepare scenarios and give them examples of ways to help. So perhaps you have an individual who's coming in a wheelchair and perhaps they're struggling with the door, okay? Well, give that example to your volunteers and ask them what they might do, okay? And workshop with them, what are some appropriate ways to respond to that? Okay, the way that I would say is, and I'll talk more about some tips and tricks in a minute too for the way that we talk, but ask the individual if they need help, ask if there's something you can do, okay? The second point here is PBIS framework. So for those of you who might not come from an education background, PBIS stands for Positive Behavior Intervention and Support. And it's a really big concept in education, and it's specifically got its start in schools with special needs classrooms. So the PBIS framework, though, basically says, how do we give people kudos when they do the right thing, and how do we stop a behavior how do we figure out why someone is having a behavior that we don't like, okay? So perhaps you have, and even this works great, even understanding any individuals, right? Because we've all, had, if you're in the education world, you have a camper or something who's, going off and doing something that you don't like. So here's my thing. I absolutely can't stand it. This is my personal thing. I can't stand it when kids lean back on their chair and they put the two legs up in the front. It fills me with anxiety. And so the way that I might approach that using a PBIS framework, and there are tons of resources out there for how to do this, is why is the student doing that? Okay? What are they doing? Is it because they're uncomfortable? Is it because they're bored? Is it because they know it gets under your skin and they want attention? So thinking about ways, why is a behavior happening and how can you solve it, right? Because if it turns out that student just wants attention, well, you'll solve the problem by going and hanging out with them, okay? Maybe you pay a little more extra close attention to that individual, okay? So that's the PBIS framework, and I could do like 5 lectures on it, so I will stop there. But I encourage you, there are tons of free resources online to learn some skills using that. I would also say use opportunities to educate the public. So if you have an individual with a disability, something that's come up is I've had individuals be like, why do you have gender-neutral bathrooms? What's that about? If I say, hey, well, today I have families who maybe need extra help in the bathroom, and they might not have a caregiver who's the same sex as them. And so that's a teachable moment. And so, how can you leverage ways that you can kind of say, hey, let's take a step back and make it less about the individual who, maybe they're asking a question about, but using that opportunity to educate the public and educate your staff. Partnerships. I highly recommend that you reach out to local groups, and I'll have a couple up here. Places like Easter Seals, the autism societies in your area. They are fantastic and would probably love to come out and tell your staff how to interact with individuals with disabilities. And then finally, if you've met one person with a disability, you've met one person with a disability. Just like when you've met one person of anything, right? Everyone is unique and individual. That's why all of my little dudes here look so funky. We're all individuals, turns out. So don't stereotype individuals with disabilities, okay? I'm offering some helpful suggestions, but remember, if somebody tells you that they want something different, then respect that, okay? It's not hard. So some basic handy disability etiquette. So number 1 is the same that for everyone, be respectful, okay? Respect the individual, focus on the person and their individual personality, okay? 2, use age-appropriate words and tone. I can't tell you, my uncle is an adult man in his 50s, and you should talk to him like an adult man in his 50s, not like a kindergartner, okay? And I can say, and I bring up my uncle because he's a great example. He has a pretty severe language barrier. He has a pretty bad speech impediment. And so he's very hard to understand. But he understands and hears a lot. So if you're talking to him like a kindergartner, you're talking down to him, okay? Just because it might sound like he's not getting what you're saying because he can't repeat it back to you, doesn't mean that he's not actually getting what you're saying, okay? So always use age-appropriate words and tone. And again, if somebody says, hey, can we slow down? That's when you can respect that. Avoid labels and offensive terms. So there's a bunch of different things, handicapped or disabled people. We tend to prefer to say people with disabilities. And this is actually still a kind of hot topic in the disability sphere because many individuals prefer what's called kind of people first versus disability first, depending. So many people in the deaf community identify as deaf, and that's a major portion of their identity. Many individuals with autism identify as being in the autism community, and so that's a part of their identity, and respect that. So, but wait until you know that person and you know their preferences. So speak directly to the person. It's very tempting to want to speak to caregivers or parents who are with a child. Speak directly to the individual with a disability, okay? Be patient and ask questions when necessary. If you're not sure if someone understands you, ask a question, okay? It's fairly easy. It's okay to ask about a disability, okay? So you don't have to skirt around the fact that someone is disabled, okay? So it's perfectly all right to say, hey, is there something that I can do to make this easier for you, okay? Recognize also that people who might have a disability might not look like they have a disability, okay? So you don't need to make assumptions about someone just based on the way that they look. Offer genuine help, okay? That means don't say you're going to help someone if you don't actually mean it, okay? Don't offer to do things that you can't actually do, okay? Ask always before you engage with a service animal, okay? This happens a lot too. You're like, oh, cute little puppy. Ask. And if an individual uses a mobility device or a voice assisting device, respect that. Often individuals with autism who use a speaking tablet or something find that people want to take it away as if it's, you would take away, a kid's cell phone if they're disrespecting, you in class. But those devices are a lifeline for those individuals. So we would never, ever take away someone's wheelchair to punish them or something like that. So remember that those things are part of someone's body, and you should never take them away. So another thing to talk about too is, and this isn't necessarily just disability friendly, but just life friendly, is family inclusive language. And this takes a little bit of experimentation too, because we know that families look different for different people. So instead of asking, I always ask my kids when they come in, don't say, hey, where's mom or dad? Say, hey, where's your grown-up? Okay? Or hey, who'd you come here with? Because, I think many of us probably have had that embarrassing, like, hey, where's mom? And they're like, I didn't come here with mom. You're like, okay. So if you say grown up, right, you get everybody. Instead of saying, hey, can you, is that your son or daughter? Say, hey, is that your child? Is that your little one? Because, you don't necessarily know the scope of someone's family interaction, right? So you don't know if maybe they're living with grandma and grandpa, or they're living with aunt or uncle. Instead of saying things like extended family, just say family, okay? And instead of family resemblance, my little zombie dude here, he's supposed to be zip your lips. Because when somebody says, oh, wow, they look just like you, just keep it to yourself. Don't say it. You don't need to say it. That's the one thing, right? Just keep it to yourself, because you don't know that situation, right? So it's better to just keep it to yourself and say something great, like, wow, that is a great looking kid you got. Okay? Maybe not that enthusiastically, but yeah. What a beautiful family. So some ideas that you can try, and something I do on our Access Days too, is I have little sheets and I have resources for families. So it has, say, hey, we have a quiet space available. And so your volunteers, if they're like, hey, I see a family and I think they're really struggling, just say, hey, well, you know what? Why don't you just go up and hand them this sheet, and then they can choose if they want to utilize that resource or not. So that might be a great way for volunteers who maybe don't feel like they can go up and engage with someone. Maybe you can, say, hey, well, you know what? It's really easy for you to say, hey, there's a quiet room here. Or, hey, so you can just have a little sheet to hand out. As before, too, educate your volunteers and staff about what to expect. And that really means getting out and talking with those partners that I talked about. So ensuring that you guys are feeling safe and comfortable with whatever group that you guys are going to have. And then turning no into trying this instead. And I'll keep hitting that again and again, it is so important to make the to make our first impression of a museum a good one. So if you have someone who is, and this is all about what PBIS is all about, positive behavioral intervention and support. It's all about how can we tell you what the expectations are, okay? How do you tell someone what they should be doing? Say, hey, we don't stand against the wall, or we don't lean into the cars. We do this instead, okay? Explain to them what the expectation is first off the bat. So some strategies for success if you guys choose to go do disability-friendly programming. My first one is listen to the community. Don't do anything without engaging with your community. Ask who's around, okay? Talk to them. Ask them what they need, what would be helpful, and what they want, okay? So I'm really fortunate. I've gotten to meet with a number of groups, and so ask what are things that they want. Maybe your community, maybe you have a very large, League for the Blind chapter in your area, and so ask them, hey, do you guys want to come out and do a touch tour? Or what would be the best way that I could support you so that you could engage with our museum? Okay, because maybe they don't want to do that. Maybe they want something different. So listen to the community that's around you. Offer genuine experiences that would be fun for everybody, okay? So offer, something that everyone can enjoy, okay? And my last one is have help available. So always have extra staff and volunteers, and make sure that everyone knows kind of what the expectations are. So some local partnership opportunities that you guys should talk to. Find Easter seals in your area if you have a Down Syndrome Association. And you can often just Google like Down Syndrome Association of Georgia or wherever you guys are going back to. Find the autism societies in your area, local disabled veteran groups or other disability groups like League for the Blind. So reach out to them and say, hey, we as a museum want to get better and we want to engage you guys. How do we do that? Okay? And you will find often that they are super excited to come out to see you guys and that they want to come to your museum and they don't know how to ask how to make it easier for them. And if you can be the ones to reach out, that is a huge audience for you. So with that, I'll open it up for any questions that you guys might have. And I thank you guys so much for being a wonderful audience. Yes.
How often do you do your access days?
I do them twice a year. So 2, and I always do one on a weekday and one on a weekend because you have a different crowd. So the families come on the weekend, and a lot of times I'll do school groups and like group homes and things will come on the weekday. So that's what I would recommend. That's where I start.
Hi, terrific presentation. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
I think just because of your access days, you're dealing a lot with younger families, but in our neck of the woods, a lot of disabilities are age-related. So do you have any particular, any other strategies or other tools or tips and tricks you might be able to give me for, especially for anything that's like age-related disabilities or memory-related disabilities?
Yeah, actually, we do work a lot with, we have a lot of age-related disability groups come through. I would say that many of the same things apply. I would also say that make sure that you guys have hearing support. So if you guys don't have, we have hearing assistant listening devices, so assistive listening devices, and they can be a big help for individuals who have hearing aids, especially in things like docent-guided tours, because all of us have probably experienced, like, I can't hear them, they're way over there, let alone if you use a hearing aid. So I would strongly recommend investing in some of those. And yeah, I think really just it's the same, listening to an individual, asking what they want and what they need. Yes. Get our mic.
We've got things covered with the formal programs. The schools know who we are, the homeschool groups know, but we have a number of adult homes for folks, and it's often a mixed group. We might have a group from the same home that includes some folks with Down syndrome, TBI, autism, but they're adults, and they know that our policy is don't show up on a rainy day when we're crazy busy. Show up any other time. There's no charge for admission, and we always have a big stack of all those car magazines that just pile up, and we always check with the counselor or whoever is in charge with these folks. Is it okay if we give them a magazine to take back? And one of the most gratifying things to have happen is to have a group show up on a Monday, and then 3 days later the same van shows up with a bunch of other people. Well, these guys heard from the folks from Tuesday. They had a real blast, so we're back. And it's really a lot of fun. And some of these folks we see twice a summer. And 2 of them are a little bit more capable than some of the others, and they come in and volunteer, and they work in the shop. And you could be surprised how talented some of these young people and younger adults are as far as understanding mechanics.
Absolutely. And like I said, if you're not engaging these audiences, you're missing out on some of your biggest fans. Literally, my uncle, like I said, he would tell you 50 times how great our museum is, and he has the pictures on his phone to prove it. Okay, so if you are, we have a little boy whose name is John. John, his mother is local to the area, and he's now about 18, but when he started coming, he was about 14. He'd never been able to come to the museum before because it was just too much, and they couldn't pay for admission and then have to leave after 20 minutes. So with this, he came to every single one of my access days, and he was like, this is now my favorite place, because I was able to come here and I knew that I had a safe environment for me to visit. And so he really, came out of his shell and started to, know the staff and started to know the cars and understand our mission. And just because we had this program where he felt like he could be safe, and where his mom also felt like she could be safe coming because she knew that her son, if he was, feeling overstimulated or having a bad day, that they could go home and they weren't out anything. So that's really grateful to our partners who are able to do that. But if you can offer free or reduced admission, I would strongly recommend that too.
Yes, hi. We, at our place, we're only open limited hours. So we do offer group homes, adult care centers, and we have a lot of autistic groups in the area. We tell them they can come on a day we're not open to the public, because with our museum, we also have some very loud musical instruments, dance hall organs. There's no volume control. We do offer earplugs to people, and right at the front, we tell them if you are sensitive to hearing or in loud noises, you can take these. But I still notice there are some kids that come in and are having a hard time. And I like the idea of a sensory day, and then maybe we can do it a couple of times a year. And for kids who are parents whose kids are not in these groups can come on those days. Because I do notice that sometimes that it's a little, and we don't really have a space that we can have like a quiet area, because it's all one big room. And if you try to go in the other room, it's filled with musical instruments, so you're walking right into more. But so I thank you for those ideas, because I really, really like those ideas to do that as a offering that special day just for that. So thank you.
Yes, fantastic.
And to piggyback on that too, Terry, with our museum family, it's very similar. Booth and Tellus do special days. They do it in different ways. Tellus is open 7 days a week. So when they do it an hour or two before they open. Like, it's early hours, and so they'll have some volunteers and staff come in on a Saturday. Instead of opening at 10, they're going to open at 8:30 for this group to come in before everybody else does. The booth does theirs on Mondays because they're closed to the public on Mondays. So definitely ideas to take in consideration there. Chris?
And I would just say one thing about our museum too, just to add on to what Elyse is saying and talking about accessibility and being open for all and free or reduced admission. I know some of you are already part of the program, but if you're not aware of it, the Institute of Museum and Library Services has Museums for All, which if you choose, you can ask them to show individuals to show their EBT debit card, and you can choose whether you give them free admission or reduced admission, say $2, and that allows them and up to a certain up to you all in your museums, a certain amount of people free or reduced admission as well. So that's advertised on IMLS's website. So it's another way to be accessible for those that may not be able to afford to be able to visit your museum, including our library passes as well.
Absolutely. And it's also important too that many of those groups, you're getting a new audience with those groups. They might not have been able to or want to pay admission, but when you can offer them, hey, come check us out, a lot of times you might find that you have a new fan.
And I found in the years that I ran a children's museum before the car museum I'm at now, that it's the most rewarding days you can do. I'm taking it a little different step and working with the local Alzheimer's groups, because sensory recognition hits their deepest memories. So
Yes.
if you're playing 40s, 50s, 60s music and they see the cars, it triggers something deeper in them and actually has a positive effect on slowing, never preventing, but slowing the progression of the disease. So if you think about that, you've still got to be fairly sensory aware, not a lot of bright lights and things, but the music of their era, the cars of their era, and the facilities are just enthralled, and so is the Alzheimer's Association if you work with them for this.
Absolutely. Yeah. There's really this is really applicable to everyone, because you have, seniors, and we've talked about that, seniors maybe who become disabled, but also individuals who are lifelong disabled, but also just everyone. Everyone has days. Everyone has the experience of being overwhelmed or feeling intimidated at a museum. And if you can get your staff to just feel, and your volunteers to just be able to kind of recognize that and maybe be able to offer solutions, you would end up probably having a lot fewer visitors have to leave throughout the day, and you'd have them have a better overall feeling of engagement with your museum. Is that everybody? Well, thank you guys so much again.